Hit points are those nebulous things that tell you if your character is alive or dead. They tell you how much damage you've taken, and they tell you how much you need to heal before you can get back out there and explore dungeons. But there's a big difference between how you regain hit points in older games like in OD&D or Basic or even AD&D compared to 5e. I'm going to discuss the difference today. I'm Tristan. This is Heroes in Homebrew. So when I played 5e, although I had played AD&D in the past, or AD&D 2nd edition in the past, like many years before, I just accepted how we regained hit points. It wasn't until after playing for a bit that I realized that I was looking at hit points and damage in the wrong way. It says in the book that it's damage and that you can roll hit dice during a short rest to regain some of your hit points, and you regain all of your hit points after a long rest. But that means that it's not really damage, because there's no way you can regain like your ability to function after taking that much damage. It doesn't mean that every hit that hits is actually a slash of the sword or getting hit by an axe or a hammer. It's the accumulation of the exhaustion and muscle fatigue throughout a combat that is really what's draining your hit points. It's that final hit that takes you down to 0 that's the actual damage. Once I wrapped my head around that, I was okay, yeah, but I think there's still a lot of players that don't see it that way, that it's just, you're taking damage, and the next day, after you sleep all night, you're fine. Now, I understand that looking for kind of realism in a fantasy game that has magic and ogres and all this stuff is kind of a pointless endeavor. But there still needs to be some sort of realism. You can only suspend your disbelief for so long before it becomes silly. So when I moved over to playing older style games, like playing White Box, and the healing system in that, where you only regain 1 hit point per day, made a lot more sense. That, to me, is more realistic of okay, I'm actually taking damage, and my body is only healing so much of it every day before I'm fully back up to full health. Now, of course, magical healing exists, and that's fine. Like, I can suspend my disbelief that a magic potion is going to heal all of my wounds and I'm good to go. Or that a cleric can lay on hands and, heal my wounds. That's fine. But the idea that all of my cuts and scrapes and gashes are going to be healed after an hour rest, and I can roll some dice and be like, okay, I'm back up to, I've regained 4 hit points or whatever. That just seems silly. So I think if you're playing 5e, and I think you need to change, especially if you're running the game, you need to change your mindset on how those hit points are actually damage. If you're describing the combat and like, okay, he slashes you with his sword, okay, but that hit doesn't necessarily hit. Rolling a hit could still miss, but it's the act of the character who is getting out of the way or blocking with their shield, and they're taking on that continuous fatigue and strain of the battle. Combat does a lot more to the body than just physical damage. It tires us out. It wears us down to the point where eventually we're going to let our guard down, and that sword is going to get through and hit for that final blow. Whereas if I'm playing White Box, I'll describe that players are getting hit, that the players are actually taking this damage because the healing is much slower. The healing takes more time. They need to rest. I think this is also why players tend to run multiple characters. They'll have a backup character. Like, okay, this character's resting for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to play with this character. It's also why, if you look into it, the time between game sessions would be real time. So if you played your game on Sunday, but your next game is 2 weeks later, 2 weeks would pass in game time because it allowed those characters to heal. There's a mindset in modern gaming, especially in 5e, where players don't want their characters to die, and I understand that. It takes a long time to make a character. You get kind of attached to them. You've created this backstory or whatever. They don't want their characters to die, and so healing is much faster and they get up. It's also an indication that 5e is a superhero game where your characters are superheroes from the get-go. Whereas playing those old school games, your character is growing up into that hero. They're coming from nothing, they're a nobody. And through their endeavors and their adventures and the tales being told about them, they are slowly becoming that hero. So I think that was one thing when I came into old school style games that kind of surprised me, and it took me a little while to get my head around it. Like, well, why are we can't heal our characters quickly? And it's because you need to let your characters heal from the wounds they've taken, which is also why when I'm running my white box game, generally I'll allow real time to elapse in game. So we play every 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks will elapse in game. Most of the time. Not all the time. Sometimes if they haven't taken any damage and we're kind of in the middle of something, I won't elapse that time. But if they have had a fight and they've taken some damage, then yeah, 2 weeks are going to elapse. You're going to spend 2 weeks in that little fort by the mountains, and you're going to have to tell me what you're doing during that time, or were you just resting and recovering that damage? So what I'm saying is the damage you take in 5e is not damage, it's exhaustion and being worn down to the point where your character comes to zero. Now if your character gets to zero and then the next day they hop up and they're fine, I don't like it. I can't wrap my head around it. It just seems crazy to me. If I've been playing 5e, which I don't anymore, but if I were to play 5e, I'd accept it because those are the rules. But to me, I would port in that healing rule and say, okay, well, even though this is rules as written, we're not playing that way. You're gonna heal. I might lift it up a bit, like 1 hit dice per day of rest. And that would allow characters to not be as super heroic and sort of remain kind of conscious of what they're doing. That's the other thing. If you're only healing 1 hit point per day, you're going to be a lot more careful in your actions. You're going to choose those combats more carefully because you know you're not going to be up and running really quickly afterwards. It's got to be important. And so things like that is what really kind of drives you and like guides you into how to play that style of game. Anyway, that was just my short video on things I've come to realize as I'm diving further and further into OSR style games versus coming from 5e. If you have any comments on it, let me know down below. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe because I'll bring you more videos like this if you like it. That's it for me. That's how you see for me at your table.